On the afternoon of December 11th, 2021, at 3 p.m., Mohammad Ambree Yunos, a 44-year-old engineer from Sabah, Malaysia, rushed to the police station to report a crime. He claimed that after returning home from a trip with his wife, they discovered their domestic helper, Nur Afiyah, dead in their apartment. His voice trembled, sweat streamed down his forehead, and his fingers nervously tapped the desk, all reflecting extreme panic and tension. When police entered the apartment, they immediately noticed a strange odor permeating the air, a mixture of cleaning chemicals and a faint fishy smell. Though not overpowering, this odor created an eerie sense of unease, as if trying to conceal something dark. The domestic helper's body lay motionless on the living room floor, covered by a thin blanket. Dark bloodstains had seeped through the blanket's edges, turning dark brown and creating horrifying stains. Through preliminary examination, police realized the crime scene had been deliberately cleaned. Footprints on the floor had been wiped so thoroughly they were barely recognizable, while furniture was arranged with unusual tidiness. Too perfect for a crime scene. However, the keen eyes of investigators still discovered important clues in hidden corners. Under the sofa, dried blood that had turned black remained. In the narrow gap between the wall and floor, fragments of flesh and tissue that hadn't been cleaned were still stuck, visible under investigation lights. When the medical examiner arrived at the scene, he quickly noticed an alarming detail on the living room coffee table. In half a glass of murky water were fragments of teeth. But what truly shocked investigators was the subsequent autopsy results showing that 4 of the victim's teeth had been forcibly extracted, leaving gum tissue bruised blue-black with clear tears. The head area was covered with wounds from blunt instruments of varying depths and uneven healing stages. This clearly wasn't from a single incident of abuse. Additionally, the victim's limbs showed severe bone fractures. Particularly, the left arm fracture showed signs of healing. The medical examiner estimated this injury occurred 3 days before death, but received no medical care. The broken bone had shifted and healed abnormally, clear evidence that the victim endured excruciating pain in her final days. Ambree provided police with what seemed like reasonable testimony. He and his wife, Etiqah, had traveled to Mount Kinabalu from December 8th, and when they returned on the afternoon of December 11th, they discovered the tragedy. To prove his statement, he even presented airline tickets and hotel booking information. However, technological evidence quickly exposed these lies. The apartment building's security camera system recorded a completely different truth. Ambree and his wife had driven back to the apartment on December 10th, with the time of their car entering the underground garage clearly and accurately recorded. So what happened in the apartment during this time? Why did this couple lie? Police immediately launched an investigation into both individuals. Quickly, from Etiqah's phone, they recovered a video from December 9th. Though the video footage was somewhat shaky, the content was very clear. In this clip, Nur was kneeling on the floor, her entire body trembling with extreme fear. Etiqah was cruelly stomping on the victim's hand with high heels, displaying a cruel smile on her face. Ambree stood beside her holding a phone to record, occasionally letting out piercing laughter. This video made police more certain that this couple was closely connected to the domestic helper's death. When the investigation expanded, a series of other suspicious evidence gradually emerged. While searching the couple's bedroom, police discovered an unusual detail. Nur's passport and employment contract were hidden in the homeowner's private safe. This completely violated normal regulations, according to which workers have the right to manage these personal documents themselves and usually keep them in an easily accessible place in their own room. Locking these documents in a safe showed an abnormal and possibly illegal level of control. Next, when police traced the victim's bank account transaction history, they discovered that for the past 6 months, the domestic helper's bank account had no transactions whatsoever. This created confusion when the signed employment contract stipulated that Nur would receive 800 Malaysian ringgit, approximately $190 per month. This discovery not only made police suspect that Nur's wages had been embezzled by her employers. Residents living next to the apartment shared with police that over the past 3 months they were frequently awakened at night by terrifying sounds, desperate screams from a woman mixed with loud banging that made anyone who heard it shudder. However, whenever they showed concern and inquired, Etiqah always had ready explanations with an annoyed expression. "The helper broke something. I'm just teaching her a little lesson." Her impatient and irritated attitude prevented neighbors from asking further questions. A resident living on the floor below also reported hearing strange sounds multiple times in the early morning hours, the sound of heavy objects being dragged from the floor above, lasting several minutes before falling silent. At the time, they simply thought someone was cleaning or moving furniture, so they didn't pay attention. But now, looking back in the context of the case, those sounds became extremely suspicious and frightening. Etiqah Siti Noorashikeen Mohd Sulong was a highly educated woman who graduated from the University of Sabah, Malaysia, with a master's degree in geology. At the time of the crime, she was working as an engineer at an oil and gas company, but what made her widely famous among the Malaysian public was her participation in MasterChef Malaysia in 2012. That year, Etiqah was only 24 years old, fresh out of university with her degree. On the MasterChef stage, she appeared as a perfect role model, a carefully chosen apron, light makeup that enhanced her natural beauty, and especially a warm, gentle smile always on her lips. She demonstrated culinary talent by preparing traditional Southeast Asian dishes with remarkable sophistication, explaining the selection and use of each ingredient in detail and engagingly. With her skillful technique and approachable presentation style, Etiqah quickly won the affection of audiences nationwide. Not only that, she overcame each difficult challenge of the competition, advancing straight to the finals and securing a position in the top 3, an achievement to be proud of. Her husband, Mohammad Ambree Yunos, was equally successful in his role as a reputable construction contractor in the region. This couple truly represented the local upper class. Their life was like a perfect picture many people dreamed of: a luxury apartment with modern security systems, imported luxury cars, and especially the image of a happy family regularly appearing at community activities with their children every weekend. However, behind that glamorous exterior was a dark reality completely opposite. According to records from Malaysia's immigration department, Nur Afiyah had come to the country in July 2020 through an officially licensed labor agency. Nur was born and raised in a poor, isolated village on Indonesia's Sulawesi Island. Her family lived off traditional coconut farming, with meager income barely enough to cover daily expenses. The economic burden became even heavier when the family had to support 2 younger siblings of school age. In that situation, the money Nur sent home monthly was not only the family's main source of income, but also the only hope for her siblings to continue their education. With a deep sense of responsibility to her family, Nur lived extremely frugally in Malaysia. She cut all personal expenses, eating simply to be able to send most of her earnings home. The last call Nur made home was in November 2021. Her voice in that call was full of exhaustion and indescribable fear, a clear change from previous calls. When her mother on the other end tried to ask more about her daughter's situation, Nur appeared panicked, not daring to share much and hurriedly hanging up, leaving only a sigh. In the labor agency's records was a notable call in March 2021. It was Nur's desperate cry for help, with a trembling and urgent voice, telling them she was forbidden to go outside, had to work continuously for more than 10 hours daily, and regularly endured scolding and cursing from her employers. However, when agency staff contacted Etiqah to understand the situation, they received a completely different version. Etiqah, with a decisive and somewhat irritated tone, insisted that Nur had psychological problems and was mentally unstable. She even threatened to report to the immigration department about the helper's irresponsible work and unhealthy thoughts. Faced with no concrete evidence to prove her accusations, plus fear of being deported from Malaysia and losing her only job, Nur was forced to remain silent. Her cry for help ultimately fell into oblivion with no intervention. But the truth couldn't be hidden forever. Neighbors living around had witnessed Etiqah standing on the balcony, using a clothes drying pole to brutally beat Nur. The reason for this torture? Simply because Nur had accidentally damaged the employer's shirt while ironing. At that time, Nur in her thin clothes curled up, continuously begging for forgiveness with a voice full of desperation. Meanwhile, Etiqah, with a cold face showing no emotion, continued to swing the pole cruelly. With all suspicious clues pointing to this couple, on December 14th, police officially brought Etiqah and Ambree to the station for interrogation. Here, although both stubbornly insisted that throughout the time the crime occurred, they were traveling away from home, when evidence was brought to light, their lies began to collapse layer by layer. The picture of dark truth, a chain of savage abuse, gradually appeared before investigators' eyes. During meticulous examination at the crime scene, forensic experts confirmed that there were no signs of any strangers breaking into the apartment from outside. All windows and doors remained intact, and the locking system wasn't broken. However, the most shocking discovery was the detailed autopsy results of Nur's body. The medical examiner found countless old and new wounds interspersed on the victim's body. The shoulder and thigh areas had many wounds that had scabbed over, characteristic of blunt metal object beatings from several weeks prior. Particularly noteworthy were the circular bruises around her wrists and ankles, clear signs that Nur had been tied with rope for extended periods. Additionally, burn marks on her back and arms bore all characteristics of injuries caused by high-temperature liquids. But the most shocking discovery among all findings was the condition of the victim's scalp. Forensic experts found large patches of scalp that had peeled off, combined with scattered hair fragments found throughout the scene, proving the victim had been forcibly shaved bald. Through analyzing the healing degree of various wounds, forensic doctors could deduce that the earliest wounds could be traced back 3 months before her death, while the most recent injuries were inflicted within the final 48 hours of her life. This evidence painted a complete picture of Nur enduring organized and prolonged systematic torture. However, the examination didn't stop there. When forensic dentists examined the victim's oral cavity, they found a total of 8 soft tissue wounds distributed throughout the lip area, inner cheeks, and gums. But the most severe damage was concentrated on 6 front teeth. This wasn't a case of teeth broken due to accident or ordinary impact. Instead, all these teeth had been violently extracted, the tooth sockets were torn, and gum tissue was damaged so severely it couldn't recover. According to dental expert explanations, this type of horrific injury could only be created by humans using tools to forcibly stretch and extract teeth, and most importantly, all occurred while the victim was still alive. Without any anesthesia or pain medication, the level of pain Nur endured was rated at level 10, the maximum pain threshold the human body can endure. At the same time, police found a rusted pair of pliers in the apartment's toolbox. When tested, traces of blood remaining on this tool yielded DNA results that completely matched Nur, irrefutable evidence of the tool used in this savage torture. Parallel to analyzing physical evidence, the digital expert team proceeded to recover data from the couple's mobile phones and cloud storage accounts. The results yielded 27 videos and 53 photos, all recording brutal torture acts. This content later became irrefutable evidence in the conviction process. These videos contained horrifying scenes that made viewers shudder. In one clip recorded in early November, Etiqah became furious just because Nur accidentally broke a plate. She continuously slapped the victim more than 10 times savagely. Meanwhile, Ambree not only didn't intervene, but stood beside her holding a phone to record the entire abuse scene, even taunting disgustingly. "Move faster and we could post this on TikTok." Another video recorded on December 5th showed cruelty reaching its peak. Nur was forced to lie in the bathtub while boiling water was directly poured on her back. The victim's screams of extreme pain became entertainment for this demonic couple. They laughed loudly cruelly upon hearing Nur's cries. Even more brutal, the camera recorded on December 9th witnessed Nur having her head held down while the couple used pliers to clamp her front teeth tightly, then pull them out with savage force. While the victim was in extreme pain, Etiqah coldly commented, This tooth grew the ugliest should have been pulled long ago. What was equally terrifying was how these criminal documents were organized and stored. The videos were systematically categorized with meticulously noted file names like entertainment clips, science lessons, and many other categories. The couple treated them like trophies, carefully collected and preserved like a special collection. The investigation also revealed that Noor's daily life was absolutely controlled. All her activities were closely monitored, including weekly phone calls home that had to occur under employer supervision. Neighbors confirmed they had never once seen Nur allowed to go outside alone. Additionally, another important detail completely shattered the couple's lying story. During the period from December 8th to 11th, exactly the days they claimed to be traveling away from home, delivery personnel witnessed and confirmed seeing Ambree appear downstairs to receive online food orders. When faced with this mountain of irrefutable evidence, Etiqah and Ambree's defense arguments became extremely weak and unconvincing. Etiqah tried to explain that recording the torture videos was just harmless pranks, but she couldn't provide reasonable explanation for the genuinely painful expressions on Noor's face and in her screams. Ambree, on the other hand, insisted that all wounds on the victim's body were from falls, but detailed forensic expert analysis clearly proved these were injuries intentionally caused by violence. Given the clarity of evidence, there was no doubt that this couple's behavior had crossed all boundaries of law and human morality. They would face the harshest punishment the justice system could apply. On December 29, 2021, Kota Kinabalu Magistrate Court officially opened the first hearing. Etiqah and Ambree entered the legal process as defendants in a particularly serious murder case. At the hearing, when the judge asked about the charges, both unanimously claimed complete innocence, refusing to acknowledge any responsibility in Noor's death. The prosecution systematically presented all collected evidence, from autopsy reports to expert dental examinations, all painting a complete picture of the horrific crime. Due to the particularly serious nature of the case, involving murder with aggravating circumstances and systematic torture, the case was transferred to the High Court for trial. In March 2022, through her legal team, Etiqah officially submitted her first bail application. The legal basis she presented seemed reasonable. She needed to return home to care for 3 young children requiring special attention. Among them, twins with autism needed special medical care and education, while the youngest child was still in the breastfeeding stage. To strengthen her argument, Etiqah also submitted mental health reports from specialists, proving she had been struggling with anxiety and depression disorders for an extended period. However, the High Court Judicial Commissioner decisively rejected this bail application. In his ruling, he pointed out that this case was particularly vicious and serious, and there was real risk that if released, the defendant might interfere with, threaten, or improperly influence important witnesses in the case. Particularly, he emphasized a suspicious detail. Throughout her detention since arrest, Etiqah had never once requested use of a breast pump or any other nursing support equipment, raising serious questions about the authenticity of her claims about breastfeeding. The prosecution also didn't hesitate to add evidence refuting Etiqah's argument. They pointed out that before the crime occurred, Etiqah regularly entrusted childcare to Nur herself, the person she later tortured and killed. That she now cited childcare responsibilities to request bail clearly lacked necessary consistency and persuasiveness. However, 3 months later, the legal battle entered a new phase when Etiqah decided to escalate the matter. She appealed to the Federal Supreme Court, the highest level in Malaysia's judicial system. This time, her legal team used more sophisticated legal tactics. They cited Article 388 of Malaysia's Criminal Procedure Code, a special provision stating that female defendants in certain specific situations could be considered for bail even when facing serious charges. Simultaneously, she submitted a completely new medical report by different doctors confirming she was still breastfeeding her youngest child and that interrupting this process could harm the child's health. April 26, 2022, marked a controversial turning point in the case when 3 Court of Appeal judges made a unanimous decision, approving Etiqah's bail application. The bail amount was set at 30,000 Malaysian ringgit, approximately $7,100 US, accompanied by strict conditions including weekly police station reporting and passport surrender to ensure she couldn't leave the country. However, this decision immediately ignited fierce public outrage. Indonesian migrant worker rights organizations voiced strong opposition, viewing this as unfair privilege for someone accused of murder. They argued that allowing a person accused of torturing and killing a worker to be free while awaiting trial was an insult to justice and the victim's family. This outrage quickly spread across social media platforms. The situation became more complicated when in October of the same year, Ambree was also granted bail by the court. The reason his lawyer presented was that he needed to handle essential company business to avoid harming the livelihoods of many employees. Ambree's bail was set higher, $7,100 primary bail plus an additional $2,400 deposit. Particularly, to ensure the seriousness of the bail, 2 leaders from local charitable organizations agreed to guarantee him. After gaining temporary freedom, the couple launched an active social media public relations campaign, clearly aimed at improving their public image before the official trial. Etiqah began regularly posting warm videos showing her caring for her children, trying to create the image of a loving and responsible mother. On Ambree's side, he chose a different path to rebuild his image. He frequently appeared at mosques, participated in public prayer sessions, and displayed deep repentance. These images were posted with clear purpose, to create the impression that he was someone who had recognized his mistakes and was seeking forgiveness from the community. However, these efforts came too late and appeared to be mere surface theatrics. Public opinion already understood the truth about what had happened, and no one believed in the sincerity of these actions. On October 17, 2022, after completing the collection and verification of all key evidence, formal murder charges were filed against both defendants. Immediately, the bail rights both had enjoyed were urgently revoked. The couple was once again escorted to prison, awaiting the official trial. Throughout the lengthy, intense trial process, pressure from determining the level of responsibility and punishment for each defendant created deep cracks in their marital relationship. In June 2024, Etiqah and Ambree officially completed divorce proceedings. From then on, they not only severed all personal contact, but became adversaries in the courtroom, ready to blame each other to reduce their own legal responsibility. Their new legal strategy began with the first attack from Etiqah's lawyers. They declared that all violent acts were initiated and directed by Ambree, while their client was only a victim forced to participate in these cruel actions. To support this argument, they even presented a carefully edited audio recording aimed at creating the impression that Etiqah had tried to prevent her ex-husband's violent behavior. Not to be left passive, Ambree's legal team quickly counterattacked by screening clear videos showing Etiqah directing and controlling the abuse. They strongly asserted that this woman was the true mastermind behind the entire systematic torture plan. Faced with both sides trying to blame each other, the prosecution decided to screen all 27 complete, unedited videos, allowing the court and jury to judge the truth themselves. These undeniable images showed that both defendants actively participated, taking turns performing torture acts, coordinating with each other harmoniously, and even expressing joy by clapping in celebration before the camera. Clearly, this was a crime committed by 2 equal accomplices, with neither being a victim of coercion. This legal debate lasted over 2 years with participation from dozens of experts and witnesses. The prosecution summoned a total of 50 witnesses, including forensic doctors, digital analysis experts, and even former domestic helpers who had previously worked for this family. Digital analysis experts also provided irrefutable evidence, confirming that all videos were originals, never edited or manipulated. The recorded timestamps of files completely matched the timeline of the case that investigators had established. In the conclusion, the deputy public prosecutor strongly condemned both defendants turned the torture and abuse of a human being into a sick form of entertainment. Their satisfied laughter while recording scenes of the victim's extreme suffering said everything about their cruel nature more eloquently than any testimony. He strongly called on the court to sentence both defendants to death. Although Malaysia officially abolished mandatory death sentences in 2023, he argued that the systematic and cruel nature of torture in this case reached a level comparable to wartime torture, and only the highest punishment could represent the spirit of justice. Conversely, the defense made every effort to secure the lightest possible sentences. Ambree's lawyer proposed 30 years imprisonment combined with 4 strokes of the cane, reasoning that their client had shown sincere remorse and was willing to provide financial compensation to the victim's family. Meanwhile, Etiqah's legal team emphasized that their client had no prior criminal record and was bearing responsibility for raising 3 young children. They also hinted that unstable mental health conditions might have affected her ability to judge right from wrong in the alleged acts. However, the prosecution had sharp rebuttals to each point. They pointed out that in all recorded videos, both defendants showed clear thinking, meticulous planning ability, and complete understanding of the wrongfulness of their actions. The abuse was carried out over an extended period with high systematic organization, proving these weren't impulsive acts or due to mental abnormalities. Mental health issues, even if they existed, couldn't become grounds for exempting legal responsibility for such serious crimes. On June 20th, 2025, at the Federal Supreme Court, the final verdict was read. Both Etiqah and Ambree were convicted of murder with aggravating circumstances and sentenced to 34 years imprisonment. Ambree additionally received 12 strokes of the cane. Etiqah, protected by regulations prohibiting corporal punishment for women, was exempted from the caning portion. Deputy Public Prosecutor Deja expressed dissatisfaction with the sentencing results. He stated that the deceased, who died during the pandemic far from her homeland just to find decent work, not only had her wages withheld by these employers, but was forced to endure torture and ultimately had her life taken. Though the case has concluded its trial, many people cannot understand how this young couple with social status and considerable assets could lose their humanity to become unconscionable perpetrators of violence. Criminal psychology experts analyzing this case identified several key characteristics. First was the distorted desire for control. In Etiqah's early years, she had received high attention in the national cooking competition. However, after the program ended, the popularity quickly declined. She greatly enjoyed and nostalgic for that previous feeling of being worshipped. The glorious experiences on the MasterChef stage created in Etiqah an intense craving for power and control. The feeling of being admired by millions, becoming the center of attention, and being able to control audience emotions nurtured in her a sick desire, wanting to have absolute dominion over everything around her. In the closed environment of the home, where there was no external supervision, Nur, the vulnerable and completely dependent domestic helper, became the perfect target for these sick desires. Etiqah began establishing a system of harsh and inhumane rules, demanding absolute obedience from Nur. Any sign of resistance, however small, or any action that didn't meet her expectations led to brutal punishments that escalated over time. The investigation revealed that she had grown up in a family with extremely high expectations and constant pressure for perfection. Her parents set nearly impossible standards, and no matter how hard she tried, they always found flaws to criticize. Instead of using physical violence, her family applied more subtle but equally cruel forms of cold violence, such as ignoring, prolonged silence, or withdrawing affection as punishment. These painful childhood experiences created in Etiqah a callousness, inability to understand or feel others' pain, focusing only on satisfying her own emotions and personal needs. Regarding Ambree, he grew up in a traditional patriarchal family with extreme male superiority beliefs. From childhood, he was brainwashed with the belief that men were born to dominate, while women and those from lower economic or social classes must absolutely submit to those with more power. This toxic ideology turned him into someone completely indifferent to the suffering of those he considered inferior to himself. What do you think about this case? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for following along and see you in the next videos.